Like the default, I think non-designers think that design helps you stand out. But more than that, if done well, people don't even realize what's happening.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of Pepper Spotlight podcast, where we talk to some of the brightest mind in the content ecosystem, people who are creators, designers, entrepreneurs, and get to know their stories about how they have navigated in this content ecosystem throughout some of the past few years. And some folks that we're going to speak to in the upcoming episodes are going to be like how many years of experience they have had in this content ecosystem. My name is Pawan Rochwani. I think we have established that by the last three episodes. I'm the host of this podcast series, and I want to apologize first by saying that we have been a little inconsistent. Let's just recognize that there's no um, harm into recognizing that we have been a little inconsistent because we were running a massive campaign called Next Big Creator Awards. And if you have been in touch with us, you probably know what this entire campaign was. But if you missed out on checking out who are India's next big creators, there is a link in the description of this episode. Please go ahead and just check it out, and you'll know what I'm referring to. But I also come with the good news. Moving forward, we are going to release an episode of Pepper Spotlight podcast every week. Yes, I mean, I'll be super happy about that because we have some great folks who are going to be on this show entirely in the next few coming weeks. And earlier it was a fortnightly podcast show, but considering the massive love that you all are showing to these episodes and to the entire series, we want to make this like a weekly um, podcast series, and we will release every new episode on every Wednesday at 12 p.m. on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other audio platforms. But before I share more details about it, let me introduce you all to today's. I mean, I don't know how I introduce this person. This person is a author of a very famous Amazon bestseller. He has previously been the head of design at An Academy. Now he's the founder of 10K Designers, and by now probably you all have seen this and known him through his Instagram or Twitter account, or the promotional reels or content that we are already putting out on the Pepper Content social channels. Let's get into the conversation with Abhinav and to know how he has navigated in the Indian design ecosystem, and let's understand what are some trends that he has observed and how does the entire design space and the ecosystem looks like in India. Thank you so much, Abhinav, for giving us your time. And I have to say, this very cool background picture you have. Uh, Definitely, this
Thanks, Pawan. Thank you.
this conversation is going to go from your Zoom background till in depth about your design career and everything, every work that you have been doing. Um, to begin this conversation entirely, I want to know, and this is something out of my personal and selfish reasons that I'm asking. I really want to know from people, when did they figure out what they are passionate about? Because I did not know what I'm passionate
Hmm.
about till I was 23, 24, and I had a degree which I am never going to use again for the rest of my life. But
Yeah.
it was just like a point
Hmm.
of time that I really figured out this is what I'm passionate about. So when did you figure out
Yeah.
what you're passionate about?
You know what? For me, I realized that all throughout our childhood, we're given this idea that passion is this top down thing, which is you figure it out and then you do it. But through my experience, I realized it's actually bottom up, which is you try multiple things. And eventually, when you get good at something, you get more passionate about it because you like the progress, you like the momentum. So for me, something like this happened when I was in college. Um, I enrolled in computer science purely because I had watched The Social Network. And I assumed, I mean, at that time, my passion was, I want to make the next amazing app that people are going to use. It sounds fun because it's sort of like this intersection of technology, people, psychology. And that was one of the reasons I enrolled in computer science. However, going through the curriculum, 2 years into it, I was like, listen, like we're clearly never going to make apps in this entire 4-year program. And if there is something I want to do, I will have to figure it out myself. But then around that time is when I started getting into design, and a lot of it was just because we were doing a lot of side projects in college. So we were doing T-shirts. We were trying to, make money through the weirdest things. Like we were at one point selling skins for scientific calculators, such that you could make your scientific calculator look different. Because with scientific calculators, a lot of times they would get stolen. So we made these skins, which you could have an Iron Man skin on your scientific calculator. And a lot of these small things required me to like learn the basics of design. Eventually that led to, spending some more time online and realizing that, hey, there are people who will actually pay me for this. So that started with things like logos, posters, random banners and things like that. Eventually I discovered that there's a world called UI UX design, and that my skills are close to what they're looking for. So that's sort of when I said, okay, like this sounds super interesting. This comes back to this original concept I had before coming into college of designing products. So that's when I sort of started going all in.
Got it. And are you now coding or making apps as well on the sides, or
Yeah.
just UI UX design, or working in the design
I
space?
mean, so how it started for me was back then when I was doing this. The iPhone had just come out, so there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the US who wanted to make their own apps because it was sort of like the gold rush for apps.
Yeah.
So somehow the timing worked out for me, and there were so many people who wanted to hire designers to make apps, but of course didn't have a crazy budget. So I was there like doing all kinds of apps. Like I was making stuff like making an urban clap for Canada where you could book cleaning services, doing something where you can find people at a nightclub that you want to hang out with and split bills and things like that, like the wackiest ideas. And somehow my timing also worked out, which is after I graduated, I continued freelancing, doing a lot of this stuff. But that was also when housing.com, for example, was on a boom in India. So they were sort of, the way I saw it from the outside, they were like sort of the first company who said that, hey, design is something that we really care about. We're going to make the best experience. And I was like, hey, listen, like I've been doing this online, and now it sort of seems like India also values these skills. So that's sort of when I started doing it for a lot of Indian startups.
Wow, very cool. And I mean, this is just like a quote that I've read. If you're good at something, do it after engineering. And a lot of engineers now have, let's say, turned to designers or content writers, or let's say YouTubers or anything like that. Uh, have you observed this trend in your circle, or let's say from your college? What do you think could be like the reason for it? Are we bored
I
of
think,
the engineering, or there are no more jobs that are available for us, or what do you think could be like broader reasons?
I think it's very interesting because engineering is one of those things that you form a picture of in your head throughout your childhood, because you keep hearing it from so many people, your parents, your relatives, your neighbors, literally. And so you build up this entire image of, wow, it must be crazy because so many people are talking about it. And once you're in, you realize that, hey, wait, the outcomes are I get hired at Infosys, TCS, Accenture, these companies who come for placements and do mass hiring. Or I can get into these bigger companies like Amazon, Microsoft, which have a 9-point cutoff. And then people are just like, wait, like, hold on, what am I supposed to do? I don't want to go down these two paths. So I think that sort of kicks in that, I would say almost like a survival mechanism where you're like, shit, like I can't play this game, but then what am I supposed to do? I now need to figure something else out.
Yeah. Like fortunately and thankfully now the freelance culture in India is also booming a lot. So that's a
True.
good thing. Something that I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned, housing.com was like one of the firms, like tech firms who were, giving importance to design, and, we're focusing also in that. So what do you think, how important is design in tech, and how it has evolved let's say in the past few years, how you have observed it, and where does it stand currently?
Yeah. I think if you look at, like, if we jump back 10, 20 years in the past, actually not 10, 15 to 20 years, in the 2000s, very likely that a designer during that time was designing enterprise software for people who work in offices. And the kind of incentives there are actually very different. So, for example, let's look at a company like SAP. They have an entire business division dedicated to teaching people how to use the tool, right? So it's
Yeah.
almost like they make these tools, which are easy, which are not really easy for people to use, and then they make money because they're not easy to use, right?
Yeah.
So that was sort of like the enterprise sort of era. And of course, there were websites back then, people were definitely doing a lot of that, but it was mostly desktop software. I think the big jump came with the iPhone. And then after the iPhone, of course, with Android as well,
Yeah.
which sort of took that mainstream, which was you're no longer designing for people sitting in offices who are going to be trained to use it. You're designing for someone who literally takes the smartphone out of the box, leaves all the other stuff. There are no manuals for, this is what it can do. And you just start using it. And now that is so different from how things were before. Because now, not only do you have to make your software, do what it's supposed to, but you have to also make it so easy to use such that you don't need an instruction manual. Because even if there is an instruction manual, nobody's going to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's say how important design has become for the marketing, or let's say
Got
advertising
it.
side of things,
Hmm.
because now every brand or organization is focusing on digital promotions and on social media in general, because
True.
it's where the audience is now. Nobody's, especially during the pandemic,
Hmm.
nobody's going out and seeing billboards or reading newspapers. So how do you think it
Hmm.
has evolved in terms of, let's say, advertisement, marketing, or in general social
Yeah.
media over the past few years?
Hmm. So actually, let me also talk about the thing I just talked about and how it's come down today. The fact that now everybody is using these smartphones also means that the market has become very global, which is if you were a designer in India in 2005, you would never be compared to a designer in the US,
Yeah.
because like there would be no overlap. Like you're
Hmm.
totally designing totally different stuff for totally different people.
Hmm.
Versus today, if you look at apps, even if you're an Indian founder or an Indian designer making an app for the Indian audience, what apps do Indians use? They're all global, right?
Yeah.
So you've got the Facebook family of apps, which is Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, all of those. And then
Yeah.
most of the other apps that they're using are also designed by, let's say, designers in Silicon Valley who are at the top of their game. So it's
Yeah.
almost like even if you do have an Indian app today, your standard is so high because it's set
Yeah.
by these global companies. And design, people don't really, like normal people won't really see it as, hey, this app looks good or looks bad. It's,
Hmm.
does it feel smooth? Does it lag?
Yeah.
Do I feel frustrated when I'm trying to do something and it doesn't work out? And these things have been polished really well in these global apps, like Facebook, like the ones where people are spending most time. So now when you see that phenomenon, it's not only with tech, but it's also with other forms of design. So like, for example, you mentioned advertising and marketing. What's happened is now that it's a global market, companies all over the world are fighting for attention from people all over the world. So for
Yeah.
example, if you're designing, let's say, an advertisement for India,
Hmm.
you are competing for attention along with all the companies in the US who are also fighting for attention,
Yeah.
right? Now, of course, that might not be true for some categories.
Yeah.
Uh, it's sort of more so with things that are more online. But we've reached a point where design is very global. If you look at some of the top, let's say, D2C brands today, the ones that are selling, organic juices or skincare or the kind of stuff you would find on Cred store, for example. their design is very similar or follows a similar, uh, let's say, style or philosophy as the apps that you would find in LA, or actually the products that you would find in LA.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a global culture that is that has been defined. Yeah.
And how important do you think, because as you mentioned, it's all about, grabbing the attention, let's say through advertisement, social media, or whatever that is. Because, we were speaking to Ashish Chopra, the author of the book Fast, Cheap and Viral, and he was mentioning that, the first 7 seconds or the first 5 seconds of a particular video is what really makes your audience decide whether they want to watch the full 1 minute video or not.
Mm.
So how important does that becomes with the angle of design when, let's say you're putting out a graphic on social media.
Yeah.
So how can, a brand or let's say a creator
Mm.
really make sure that, it catches attention of people, and what design sense it should have? How do you make sure that,
Mm.
they catch the attention in the first look itself?
Mm. I think I mean, the broader point that I want to make first is that the companies in India do understand design at this point. It wasn't always the case,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I think there was this mindset earlier, which was that, why spend time designing it? Like design was seen as the layer of paint you put on top of it. Right? So they're like, theek hai, matlab, chal jayega, what we have is okay. We don't need an extra design paint on top of it. Versus now, people are understanding that design is not just that top level thing, but it's the entire thing, which is from the from the thoughts that you put into it, from how you're designing your campaigns, let's say, which is who is going to see this. Let's say you're running ads on something, or even to the point where you're like, how am I communicating something? So, for example, copywriting is technically another form of design, except that instead of visuals, you're designing with words.
Yeah.
So the definition of design has gotten a little broader. But then that's also good because it's not just designers who now have that responsibility. It's all the people who are now working, at the layer where the customer interacts with the business. Yeah. I don't think I answered the question directly though. Yeah.
No, but I think like a brilliant point
Yeah.
when you said that, even copywriters are, or let's say content writers are in that process of, designing, or in the design team, or, broadly about how
Mm.
the product is being delivered and all of those things. Very,
And
very,
I
very
think
good.
it's like the point I was also trying to make is it's like now that design is no longer a layer on top, it's almost like no design is also design. Like if you're saying that I'm not going to put any thought into how I do this, that's a design decision you're taking.
Yeah.
And that will then affect how people perceive it. So
Yeah.
no design is also design. You're still making a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, I mean, just like a small sub question about if you have observed some brands or let's say some campaigns, having this kind of, let's say, narrative or, ideology that,
Hmm.
having no design is also like a design. Any example that you want to
Hmm.
share about this?
I think I try to, okay, let me think about this. So in general, I sort of feel like design is very invisible. So when design is really good, you don't notice it. But when it's bad, it stands out. So let's take an example of this, right? Um, let's talk about companies that do scammy marketing, right? You see a lot of stuff
I really
written
like how
about
this
them.
conversation is moving towards the scammy part. So yeah, please.
And the reason people sometimes have a negative association of marketing is because the good marketers don't stand out. The good marketers are doing it so well that it's invisible.
Yeah.
But the bad marketers will always stand out, right? An example of this in a different kind of domain is if you look at, let's say, you look at some of the brands on Twitter, like let's say some of the biggest companies, Zomato, Ola, Flipkart, Cleartrip. When you look at that Twitter and they're sharing these amazing posts, they're saying Happy Republic Day, we're happy to serve all of you. Every single reply, there's never a positive comment. There's never saying, hey, thank you, Ola, for doing this. It's always your driver did this. My, delivery hasn't reached me yet. People literally pinging, Vijay Shekhar Sharma saying, yo, Paytm did this, Paytm did that. So it's always like you see the negative side of it a lot more. And the positive sides, it's all invisible. So that way, it's almost like, if you don't do it well, it's going to stand out. So you want to do your design, your copywriting, your marketing in a way that, like, the default, I think non-designers think that design helps you stand out. But more than that, if done well, people don't even realize it's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna come to move now from these questions and ask you more about 10K designers. But before I
For sure.
ask you about that, you mentioned that you were freelancing, creating logos or creating some products, stickers, t-shirts, and everything else. Tell us, how did you navigate that freelance career path as a designer? Because that's something that a lot of audience at Pepper would really want to know.
Yeah.
How did you navigate over like the past few years, and even now, if you're still doing that? So how has been that navigation as a freelancer for you?
Yeah. I think the biggest misconception that I had that held me back when I was starting out was that I need to be an expert to be a freelancer, which is, for somebody who's starting out, let's say it's in copywriting, design, marketing, development, something else. They always, if they've never asked for money for their skill, they always feel like, hey, why would somebody pay me? Let's say let's say I'm in college and I've just started designing. Why would someone pay me? Wouldn't they pay a professional? Or, I've just started learning a skill. It's only been 3 months. People are like, I need to at least do this for a few years before people can pay me.
Yeah.
And that misconception, even today, when I speak to designers, it holds them back. But the truth is, there's a market for everything, which is there are clients looking for freelancers at every skill level. Not everybody can afford to get the best. Not everybody can afford to get the most expensive, the most popular designers or agencies or whatever. There's a lot of people who are sort of in the middle to start as well, which is somebody who's just starting their company, who has a small budget, but they still need to get this work done. Now, they are more likely to pay, let's say, somebody who's a beginner than somebody who's an expert. So that was the initial misconception I had early on. But eventually, as I started freelancing online through, Upwork, a lot of these freelancing websites, I realized, wait, like, people are paying me what's good money to me. Like, back then, a couple of $100 per month, that was crazy. I was like, shit, like, this is what my monthly salary was supposed to be with 2 or 3 years of experience.
Yeah.
So I think that was the initial thing. And then beyond that, I think freelancing is sort of a game of momentum, which is every single project that you do, how do you leverage that to find a bigger project? So usually what this looks like is either, referrals from your current clients. Mm-hmm. So that then becomes a good base. So you don't have to keep looking for new clients, but also creating some sort of repository, which is your proof of work. So for example, here's all the work I've done with these brands, and here's a case study on how it helped them achieve whatever their outcome was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So I think most freelancers say that, hey, 6 banners, this is what I designed. Versus the way you want to actually present that is, this is how this company increased their sales because of this thing that I did. So just that messaging of, you are not this person who is there to use the tools. You're not the person who just like writes stuff. You're a problem solver. The business comes to you and says, this is what we need done. Your skill set is how we want to achieve it. You do this, the business achieves an outcome. So that's typically the advice I give freelancers. Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, like, should we, instead of, just quantifying that, this is the work that I've done, share about how you have transformed and, what that transformational value is for a particular client, about how you increase their sales or how you build their audience, or, just maybe got more organic results for their websites or things like that. So I think that is something that can
definitely
really, really help.
Definitely. And another way to maybe look at it is people focus too much on the outcome rather than the story, right? I always tell, for example, at 10K designers, all my students, I tell them, don't just show your final screens or don't just show this final logo that you've done. Tell the story of how you reached here. Because when you tell that story, what you're doing is you're educating the client on how the process
Yeah.
looks like. You're building trust because now they see that, oh, this person knows what they're doing. They have a process in place. And
Yeah.
by putting this out publicly, you're creating this opportunity to get more inbound leads for projects.
Got it. So tell me, how important was it to be on platforms like Upwork, or let's say how important it is to have your own website or like a Behance account or Dribble account or anything like that,
Hmm.
especially for the initial period, till you really establish yourself as a designer out there in the market? How important were these websites?
Yeah. I think the way I look at it is that, so in fact, I've written a book called Pajama Profit, a book about
Yeah.
freelancing. So
Yeah.
this is an Amazon bestseller in that category. But back then, when we wrote that book, not that long ago, just a few years, the way we described it was you can treat Upwork as a game, which is it's been designed with these certain rules. There's certain things that the platform allows you to do. And in return, out of every project, they take a fee from you. They take a fee, and that's the game that you're playing. Over
Mhm.
time, as you get better at this game, your avatar or your profile on these platforms also improves, which makes you better at playing future games. However, there is always the aspect of competition, which is
Hmm.
with these platforms. If it was as easy as, we have 1,000 projects, please come, work here. It wouldn't really work out that way, because then you have a lot of people who flood the marketplace with low value skills and everything. So for these platforms, they also have these incentives to um, keep quality controls, which is, as a freelancer, it might actually be hard for you to get into these platforms as a beginner. Upwork, for example, has a much longer vetting and review process these days. So the way I typically tell people is that, hey, platforms are great. However, it's a game. You cannot stay on these platforms forever, right? The people making the most money on these platforms, um, or even the ones who are not making that much money, they treat the platforms as one source of leads. However, as a freelancer, your competitive advantage will be what are your other sources of leads.
Yeah.
So, for example, the platform can give you a few projects a month,
Hmm.
or some months might be dry. You might get 0 projects, but then
Hmm.
you have a second source of leads, which will be your referrals, your past clients.
Yeah.
You could have a third source of leads, which is your website, let's say, where you're posting these case studies of how you help brands. Um, and that then becomes a lead, inbound leads. You could, for example, be killing it on LinkedIn, posting really useful information, which then gives you more leads. So I think overall, what it comes down to is the most successful freelancers have an abundant supply of leads, which is they can say they know who they're going to say yes to, the ones they're
Hmm.
going to say no to. And that gives them real control, because now you're not doing bad projects. You're not doing the low value projects. You're not doing the projects that don't interest you. When you have that abundant supply of leads, you have the confidence now to really have a say in the kind of stuff you want to work on. Yeah.
Something that you mentioned about, was the fourth point that, on LinkedIn, you like just write about your work, or, just talk about your process or about anything that's related to your field as well. How important that has become today as a freelancer to have like a social
Hmm.
media account, or let's say be active on Twitter or on Instagram or LinkedIn or maybe YouTube also,
Yeah.
or whatever other platforms. How important it is in 2021 for freelancers. What do you think about that?
So the way I think about it is that today it's not just enough to have the skills. You also need to be your biggest cheerleader, right? And when I say that, a lot of people are like, "No, man, like that sounds that sounds bad to a lot of people because they're like, I don't want to just like post stuff on Twitter, just self-promoting myself, or on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
just self-promoting myself. I would rather just do the work. It's really good. I know it's high quality. I'm improving, and that's it. But the point is more than self-promotion. We are reaching a point where creators are their own business, which is
Yeah.
you are responsible for growing yourself as a business. So what that means is that there's no institution above you who's taking care of all of this for you. You are sort of
Yeah.
the sovereign creator. And when that happens, it means you need to own your distribution channels. So what that means is that, let's say you're looking for um, let's say you're looking for a copywriter to join you for a project.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big project you've gotten and you need 2-3 more people to be able to work on it. What would you do in this case? So a really good creator or freelancer, all they have to do is put a tweet out or put a LinkedIn this thing out, or
Yeah.
they have WhatsApp groups, they ping their this thing and sorted. Right? That is your network. Similarly, let's say if you're looking for new projects and now you have
Mm-hmm.
more time, all you have to do is sometimes just put a tweet out saying, "Hey, I'm looking for projects," and you get 10 replies to it.
Mm-hmm.
So more than anything, the way I sort of tell people is that, listen, social media is not really about self-promoting all the time. Because to be honest, nobody wants to follow someone who's just talking about themselves,
Yeah.
who's just concerned about, what can I get from this platform.
Mm-hmm.
People want to follow people who are doing interesting stuff. But then the way they'll find out you're doing interesting stuff is if you actually share your story.
Yeah.
And share it in a way that um, you're sort of doing it to add value. You're not really doing this with the ulterior motive of, I want to get 5, let's say, clients per post that I put out. You're doing it more of, is this going to be useful to somebody else who's in my position? Maybe they're going to, maybe they can hire me, maybe not. But over time, let's say 5 years down the line, this is like almost an asset that will compound. So most people also do give up really early.
Yeah.
But the point is, the longer you do it, that is your influence that you're building online. So you are then building that reputation, and the reputation is what will lead to personal brand. I don't think you can start from personal brand from day one. Personal brand is built over time as a result of the actions that you've put in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all of these, answers, and I've just been trying to visualize in my head how you started as a, from the Social Network movie, taking up into a computer science course, and then designing some products and logos, t-shirts, and all of those things. Where did writing a book come from in the middle of all this, and how did that happen for you? Uh, I mean, were you always interested in writing a book, or how did that happen? I'm very curious to know about that.
So me and my co-author, Varun, we sort of started freelancing together in college. And the sort of shared approach that both of us have is that life is a series of projects, right? It's a series of projects. When you do these projects, you earn experience, but you also help other people out because you're sharing your experience. So for us, the book about freelancing, it was more of, if we don't talk about our experiences with freelancing right now, 2 or 3 years later, we're going to forget how we did it, right? So it was
Yeah.
more of, there's a lot of people from college itself who were like, how do I get started? So a lot of people from our, personal networks, from YouTube audience, Twitter followers, who were like, hey, how do I find clients? How do I do this? So for us, it was mostly an experiment. It was like, hey, we've never really written a book before. And somehow we were able to get this published as well. So we were able to get this published by Bloomsbury. And it was a nice experience. It was good to see how the physical book publishing process works. Yeah.
And was it how did you guys get trained about writing a book, or you were like, no, let's just
Yeah.
write it and then we'll figure out how it's edited and all of those things? How is the process of it?
So what we did was we set up a shared Google Doc between us. And we said, okay, let's just add to it every once in a while. So, one day Varun would be feeling really inspired and he would write 20 pages. And and then I would go back and I would like edit his work, or I would
Mm-hmm.
do a lot, and then and over time there was some top-down thing, which is we roughly figured out what our chapters should be,
Mm-hmm.
but then we just started filling these chapters, kept reformatting, changing it, and once it started taking shape, what we did was we just cold emailed the top 20 publishers in India.
Mm-hmm.
I think out of that, 3 or 4 people replied, and we
Mm-hmm.
ended up going with Bloomsbury. Yeah.
Wow, wow. Now, coming like this is how I see your entire story as again starting from social network, then engineering, comp science, getting into design, freelancing, writing a book, and now to teaching design to 10K
Yeah.
designers masterclass. How has how did this happen? Like
Hmm.
teaching, how did you get into teaching, and just thinking about you should create this course and you should create this masterclass. Tell us about that process, and also what really is
Hmm.
10K designers.
Yeah. So for me, I have been doing a few projects here and there. Like I do a lot of side hustles, so projects, but most of them, back in the day, run it for a few months, get bored, move on to the next thing. So one of the things I had done was an online course back in, I think, more than 3 or 4 years ago. So this is like a self-hosted, pre-recorded course, just as a small side project. Did decent. Wasn't thinking so much about online education till I decided to join Unacademy. So this was around the time, so after college, I was at housing.com for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of that, me and a couple of colleagues, we decided to start up. So
Mm-hmm.
this was when we built our own social network. So we
Mm-hmm.
built this music app called Listen.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole concept was it was a way to listen to music together in a chat room.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say you're there and I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
We can play synced music from Spotify and SoundCloud in a chat room. So we did that, went really well. In a year, we were able to get maybe around 8,000 to 10,000 users.
Mm-hmm.
However, we realized like, hey, like, firstly, social is a very crowded space. It's a very competitive space.
Yeah.
And secondly, music is also one of those spaces. Like most people have fixed habits with their music apps.
Yeah.
But anyways, so at the end of that, I decided, so we had a couple of acqui-hire offers, um, as we were shutting that down. But I decided to join Unacademy, and it was super early at that point. So I think the tech team was like maybe 10 people.
Mm-hmm.
And, founder Gaurav, he was like, what do you want to do at Unacademy? It's a completely open field. Like we
Mm-hmm.
have no design team yet. Our product team, we have no product managers yet. Take on one of these things. And so I was like, okay, let me set up the design team.
Mm-hmm.
So 2.5 years there were a big learning experience for me. Not just in terms of like online education and how that works, but also just being at a fast growth startup. And while there, my team and I, we built like one of the main projects we did was Unacademy Plus, which was the live learning platform. So we were responsible for building the learner side tools. How do people learn? How do they keep track of their progress? What modes of learning do they have? And on the educator side, all the educator tools. So what platform do they use for live learning? How do they keep track of the feedback that they're getting from students? How do they improve their own teaching styles? And around this time, I actually started my YouTube channel. So I started a YouTube channel where I was sharing stuff related to design tutorials, things like that. And mostly my motivation around the time was a lot of our creators at Unacademy were also YouTubers. So I just wanted to see, what is that experience like? So it was mostly an experiment for me. However, 2.5 years later, I was like, okay, hey, now I'm sort of at a pivotal moment, which is I know this company is going to grow huge. The stuff we've built, even today, only scaling up. However, I didn't really want to stay down the route of just becoming a design manager and then a design, So like I was head of design, and then I didn't really want to stick to that corporate structure. So for me, it was like, hey, I've had my learnings from here, and now it's time to do something of my own. And by this time, I had built up a community. So 10K Designers was technically the name of my YouTube playlist.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the YouTube, I had like a Telegram group, which was 1,000, 2,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
For me, at this point, it became kind of clear. I just asked the community saying, hey, what would you like to see?
Mm-hmm.
And the unanimous answer was we want an end-to-end course
Mm-hmm.
that teaches design. So I jumped into that. But then one of the reasons was a very obvious thing for me to do was also because while at Unacademy, we interviewed hundreds of designers, right, over the course of those many years. And we always realized that there was always a gap, which was designers who are coming from colleges like NID and even the best colleges in India.
Mm-hmm.
The gap was they stuck too strictly to their process. They didn't understand how a startup worked. They didn't understand that, building products is not something you can do over a 6 months. You literally sometimes have to ship weekly.
Yeah.
And then that gap also existed for self-taught designers, which is a lot of self-taught designers didn't, for example, have process at all. Like they would figure it out, hardcore hustlers,
Yeah.
but fundamentals were kind of weak sometimes. So with the idea with 10K designers was, how do we bridge that gap? Which is 100% design is one of those skills that almost every company realizes that is super valuable. Design can be a differentiator if done right. Design can add, millions and billions of dollars to your valuation, because design is now, it's a big field. However, how do you really hire designers? Most founders, so I did a lot of interviews with founders and realized that founders either don't know how to design, how to hire designers. They don't know what to look out for. And a lot of times it came down to, I have to take a chance on this person. And I don't really know, like I'll have to onboard them. It's a huge process. So the whole idea with 10K designers was we're going to create a 3-month course, which is so tightly tied to what the industry wants that in those 3 months, you will learn the fundamentals. It's not going to be just design. You're also going to learn things around business, marketing yourself, building your personal brand. In those 3 months, you're going to build up a body of work, which is, it's going to be your case studies, your entire portfolio. And towards the end, if you've done all this well, we'll connect you to companies in our network who are looking for designers. And that can be like a solid way for you to enter the industry.
I mean, 2, 3 small sub questions about it. One is, because you have also mentioned that how this space is so constantly evolving, right? I mean, design, social media, tech, everything is so constantly evolving around us. Um, First question is, how do you make sure that, in that 3 month of period, you can teach these aspiring designers and students everything that they might need for the next 3, 4 years, or let's say 5 years? That's like one sub question. Um, Second is about how you were talking about the people from NIT or other colleges have their fixed process. So do you in the 3 month long course also tell people to stick to a process, or how is it? Like, just very curious about these two things.
Yeah. So I think it's a very good point that you brought, which is the kind of field we are in literally changes with every software update, right? Like Facebook could release an update which totally changes how marketers run ads tomorrow. Or,
Yeah.
Apple could do an iOS update tomorrow, and that totally changes all the guidelines of how things work. And that's one of the reasons why colleges have a really hard time keeping up. Because for them, a curriculum means something which has stood the test of time, which has made its way to textbooks. So instead of responding to this and making their curriculum more nimble, colleges have become more defensive, where they're like, no, that's wrong. What we're teaching you is right, right? So colleges have gotten a little more defensive. So in those 3 months, what I try to do is I don't say that I'm going to teach you everything you need to know for the next 5 years, or I'm not even going to teach you the exact things that you would learn in college. However, we're going to teach you, it's almost like the MVP of curriculums, which is we're going to teach you the minimum that's required to be able to get a job, However, we're going to expose you to this entire field in a way that you build the right mindset around it. Because when I look at my colleagues, my friends, my peers, back from the housing days, even today, one thing that I've realized is the people who are doing really well today are the ones who figured out how to keep up. People who really love learning new things and are not really trying to, be protective of what they learned in college. They're like, everything I know could change tomorrow, and I'm just gonna accept it. I'm gonna do what's happening today. So the whole program, it's more than just the content. We try to create this. We try to teach you these frameworks for how you can get better at learning things. How do you unlock your personal productivity? And then, since it's a cohort-based course, which is it's a 3-month thing, you do it with other people. We're really, really focusing on the alumni aspect of this, which is most people when they start out in design, they don't know any other designers. That's the reason they sort of feel stuck. And that's not an easy conversation to have with your parents either. Your parents don't know what UI UX design is. So we help you build that community, which is even after you're done with a 3-month program, the collaborators and friends you've made during this will stick on way longer. So for example, we have people from cohorts who are now working in the same company together. We have people who started a design studio together. We have folks, who are like really good friends now. So over time, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build that alumni network, which includes, companies, which includes past students, which includes a lot of our industry mentors that we get involved as well. Such that you're not just learning this content, because content is available throughout the internet. We're drowning in content, but you're able to form that network, and that network makes sure that you are, going in the right direction.
Got it. And this has brought me to a very interesting last question to this conversation, which is, and you even mentioned before that, you created like a Telegram group. It had 1,000, 2,000 designers and, some folks. You build a YouTube channel, and then through that YouTube channel, you build your audience. And now when you brought in the term of alumni network and how you are building like a strong cohort and a community, how important it becomes for a freelancer, or let's say creators and designers, or even content writers, copywriters, anybody out there, to have that strong support circle and network for you, or just be around some folks who do similar work to you. Because I mean, sometimes being a freelancer and being a creator becomes a little difficult, right? With respect to financially, professionally, however it is. How important that community or that cohort, and just having that one friend in the same network becomes.
Yeah. So I'll tell you this one personal story, right? In college, we were freelancing. We were, making good money to the point where we didn't even sit for placements. We're like, what's the point? We were doing really well, and we were very happy with it. College got over. I moved back to Bangalore from Manipal, and I continued freelancing. I was like, this is fun. I get to work on new stuff all the time. The money is good. I have that flexibility of lifestyle as well. But then 6 months in, I'm sitting at Starbucks, I'm sipping my coffee, and it's lonely. Because when you're doing this in college with all your friends, it's like, it's a full scene. You're in the hostel rooms, you're in each other's apartments, you're having fun. But I think lately we're getting into a place where more people are working remotely. More people are going for global opportunities. So they have people in multiple time zones. And more people are opting to skip the office. Now, whether skipping the office means working remotely or being an independent, let's say, creator or freelancer. So when that's the scene, it's super important to have that community. The main reason is that I think we sort of take for granted how easy it is to make friends while in college, because you're all going through that shared experience together. And then once you're out, you make friends which are your colleagues in office. But then it gets harder and harder to find friends, make friends, and have these shared experiences with people outside that circle.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there's many advantages to having that community. One is just that it gets harder to make friends as you get older. So you need a way to, find new people who can expose you to new ideas, who can possibly become collaborators in some way. You need a community because most, most opportunities, most projects that you will do come from referrals. Like the top freelancers I know don't even reply. A lot of them don't even reply to their DMs because they're like, dude, I have so many projects just from my past clients and referrals.
Yeah.
And most of these and even with jobs, like most jobs get closed through referrals before they're even posted online on LinkedIn or on a job portal.
Yeah.
So that community can help you firstly grow. It can help you learn new things. It's a good way to make these friends who are also going on a similar journey with you. So, when you have questions, when you feel stuck, you know that somebody else is also going through something similar and you can talk to them. But professionally, a community can help you figure out growth. It can help you find these new opportunities. And I think eventually it comes down to, people say you are the sum of the people you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's limited to the physical realm anymore. Right?
Yeah.
It's now online, which is you are the sum of your community.
Yeah.
Because that is where you will, more than the time you spend offline in office, you're spending most of your time on the internet. So it might as well be with a group of people who have that shared goal, and then you can work together with them.
Yeah, very interesting because that is something that even I had faced in past few years, that you really need to have people around you who can understand the work that you're doing, or just similar pathways of professional life and things like that, and that support circle and that community becomes really, really important. Abhinav, thank you so much for answering these different set and diverse set of questions for us, right from
My pleasure.
how you started, how important it's to have a social network, how to navigate your way as a freelancer in the design space, in the content space. I think everyone is going to thoroughly enjoy this conversation. This has been so insightful. At least, like for me, it was like, oh wow, I'm listening to a TED talk or something like that. So thank you so much for giving us your time and doing this conversation. Any tips, or let's say pointers that you want to share to aspiring designers or freelancers out there in India?
I think my main thing that I would tell them is it's not about the content. It's not about the bookmarks that you have saved in your Chrome. It's not about, reading the top Medium articles. In the end, it's about people. It's about the people you meet on your way. It's the people who are on a similar journey. So my advice would be that, try to focus on forming these relationships, which is if there's somebody out there who's doing great work and, you're like, damn, that person is inspiring me, or I want to be more like that person. You can, of course, observe from the sidelines, but it's always great to form a relationship. So send out a lot of cold outreach messages. I would say you should be sending out cold messages every single week. Even if, you think you're not good at it, even if you think you don't have a solid art, figure it out. But that is how you form relationships. So, if anybody is interested in getting into UI UX design or wants to have a conversation with that, my DMs are always open, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn, wherever. So, that's what I would say.
Wow, super. Once again, thank you so much, Abhinav, for giving us your time. And when we share this, people are going to definitely reach out to you on DM, and we'll just mention the link to your Twitter and Instagram accounts in the description of this episode. But thank you once again for doing this conversation with us today.
Awesome, man. Thank you for inviting me, Pawan. Enjoyed the conversation a lot. Yeah.
I hope you all enjoyed this conversation, and if you did like it, or some parts of it, or the full conversation, please share it with other designers, other content creators, other freelancers, and please help us spread the word about this entire podcast show, because this show is still young and needs all the support that we can get from all the content creators, freelancers, and everyone in the content ecosystem. Please feel free to share this on your IG stories, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever you can. And if you have any suggestions or feedback for us, please feel free to DM us on Instagram, pepper_content. We are more than happy to take all your suggestions or guest recommendations that you have. We also frequently ask what questions should we, take in these podcast conversations. So that usually happens on our Instagram stories. Please feel free to share any questions that you have, and we always share about who the upcoming guests are going to be for the show. So feel free to be connected to us over there so that we can take all your recommendations. And if you have any suggestions for us, we are always listening to you on our DMs. Thank you so much for listening to the fourth episode of Pepper Spotlight Podcast. This show will be now weekly, and we will be releasing a new episode every Wednesday, 12 p.m. on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Hubhopper, Anchor, and probably every other podcast app that you have. Till then, take care. The lockdown is still going on crazy, but stay safe, stay indoors, and stay in touch with us. Bye bye, guys.